Hey, good evening, everyone. It's me, Daniel Miller, and it's time for our midweek coffee break where I step away from the things that I'm doing and fire up the camera and decompress a bit. Opportunity to visit with you, answer your questions about TEXIT, about the Texas Nationalist movement, whatever. And man, this has already been a week. Like it's been a week of weeks. It feels like so much going on in the TNM. So much we are getting ready for. It's just it's been super busy, and then of course you know it's nonstop. I don't know if you've seen the events calendar lately. If you go to tnm.me/events, but if you go there, you'll see why things are starting to stack up, and yours truly will be doing this an awful lot from the road coming up over the next weeks and months. So just get ready for it, right? Let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully, you got your coffee ready to go, and let's do our thing, right? First and foremost, let's get the business out of the way. If you have a question, you can always email it. Look down here at the bottom on the little scroller, and you will see at some point the email address pop up, but it is coffeetalk@thetnm.org. That's coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Boom. Let me put it on the screen for you right there, right? So email your questions there. Or if you're participating on the YouTube, either of the YouTube channels or either of the two Facebook pages, drop it in the comments. It all aggregates over here on the side of the screen, and Kara's in there right now getting ready to get those questions. So I've got email going over here, right? Your emails. We've got the chat. And, I fully expect you guys are going to keep me super, super busy tonight. We're going to make the best of the hour that we have together. Couple little housekeeping things, right? If you are watching on the YouTube channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. That way, you will always know when we are going live. And of course, chat is active on both of those. So make sure you drop a chat. And then, of course, if you're watching on either of the Facebook pages, you can like and comment and share. Okay, like, comment, and share. All of those things help us defeat the dastardly algorithm. Right? Share it. I got. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Our local coordinator, Christina Drury, up there in Tyler, sent me a screenshot of when she got the notification, and it was like hours after the live broadcast had happened. It was a notification that we were going live. So, don't think it doesn't happen. It happens, and it happens more often than I think we would all like. Okay. So here's what I wanted to do before we get kicked off tonight. A quick reminder that the Catalyst campaign, our major fundraising campaign, is going on right now. You can check out the details at tnm.me/catalyst, or just click any of the donation links on tnm.me. We're doing well. You guys are doing phenomenally well. We still need to try to hit our benchmarks, right? We've got kind of the amount that we want to hit. And if you participated in the unveiling of the Catalyst campaign, you know what that number is. Excuse me. I'm going to get a cough drop. You know what that number is, and why it is that we need to do it. The long and the short of it is that we need to go win, and to go win, it's going to take money. So head over to tnm.me/catalyst and to make a contribution to the Catalyst campaign. I'm getting a cough drop. It's happening, right? Also, if you have not downloaded the TNM's mobile app, be sure you do that. Head over to tnm.me/app. That's tnm.me/app. You have to have a registered account on the website to be able to access the mobile app. But once you do, you can head over to those links on tnm.me/app, or head over to the Apple App Store or to the Google Play Store and get the TNM app. And, our devs are doing a great job. They are making fixes and enhancements and updates and everything else almost on a daily basis. And some of them are very small and some of them are nice and big. So It's just this has been a one heck of a wild ride for us. All right. So, as I stated with the hour, rather than me pontificate about anything particularly on my mind, because everything I need to talk about will not fit in an hour. Trust and believe. It would take probably a weekend long workshop. So, tonight, you guys are going to be driving it, your questions, your comments. Looking forward to tackling those. So, let's just go ahead and hit it. What do you say? Oh wow, yeah, it's already full. We've got plenty of these via email and over here via chat. All right. Let's see. Let's take this one. Will Casey says, "Love the shirt." Yeah, notice, look, it's casual, and of course, Will Casey, who's he's our videographer, he's our video guy. Will saw me actually in a T-shirt last night on the communications team Zoom that we did. And so here I am in a polo, and this was one the org did for the convention. And I don't know for a fact, but there may still be some available. But there's a lot of new merch over there in the T&M store. So head over there to tnm.me/store, shop, whatever it is. Go to tnm.me, hit the store icon, and go check it out. There's tons of it over there and lots of really cool stuff. These polos, this honestly is probably one of the most comfortable polo shirts that I've ever owned. So here you go. Here you go, Will. It's Casual Friday, many, many days early. So there you go. Okay, John Robinson, one of our local coordinators. John wants to know, Daniel, what happened with your Houston speaking event? Yeah. Everyone that had RSVP'd to the Houston speaking event should have gotten an email yesterday. When the and it was on the calendar up until yesterday. I have a speaking engagement. I was booked for a speaking engagement in Houston to speak to an organization over there. And one of the things we ask right up front is, when they book, is this an event that's open to the public? And initially, it was communicated to us that this was an event that was open to the public, so we put it on the calendar. Then, through subsequent conversations, we find out that it is not, in fact, open to the public. It's just for their organization. So, we had to pull it from the calendar. We had to email out all the people that RSVP'd, and I really hate to do that. And it's disappointing for me because I love to see all of y'all. But the bottom line is they're the host. And so we got to abide by their rules. And bottom line, looking forward to visiting with those guys, looking forward to sharing the TEXIT message with them, helping them understand a lot more about why this needs to happen and how it can happen. And for those of you that are disappointed that I won't be able to be there for this speaking engagement, trust and believe. Watch the calendar. It's not like that's going to be the only time I'm in Houston anytime soon. But I appreciate you asking that, John. I needed to talk about that tonight anyway. But if you did RSVP for that event, you should have received an email yesterday, sometime in the afternoon or evening, I think, that explains the whole situation. So apologies for that. I hate doing that, but I've still got to go, but I don't get to see you. And so it's kind of a bummer, right? Here's a good one. Stephen wants to know, how can you drink coffee so close to bedtime? If I drink coffee after 4 p.m., I won't be sleeping anytime soon. Stephen, I drink coffee from the time I wake up pretty much to the time I hit the bed, right? It's work, and coffee kind of helps grease the gears, so to speak. And look, I have told you guys this maybe before. I talk about my parents quite a bit. I was raised by my grandparents. So when I talk about my parents, my mom and dad, I'm talking about them. And Dad was an iron worker. After he got out of the military in Korea, he became an iron worker. And for those of you who don't know what it is, if you go into any city and any building of substantial height and you see it being built and you see those guys up there walking those beams, that's what my dad did. He did it for 35 years. And so one of the last projects that he worked on was before he retired, he worked on the Galleria in Dallas. And we lived in Longview, and he was commuting back and forth. So, interestingly enough, just so you know, I didn't have a chance when it came to the coffee. They had me strapped in a high chair, and before he would leave for work, like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he'd have me in the high chair, and he'd be having his coffee, and he would spoon feed me coffee. So uh, I have been a coffee fan since I was 18 months old, and probably interesting side note, having parents of that age. I was literally the only guy in my school that when I took my lunch to school, it came in like a worker's lunch pail with a thermos and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it was straight up like a Herman Munster lunch kit. So, I do. It doesn't affect me like that. All right. Okay, here's a question from Deborah. Deborah wants to know how many of our state representatives are on board with this movement. Well, we're getting a new crop. And of course, we've already started having dialogue with some of the existing guys. A lot of our allies did not make it, right? They either did not run again or or got redistricted out of their districts, right? So you take a guy like Jeff Kaysen, who was intentionally drawn out of his district. You get Kyle Biederman, who did not run again. We've got Brian Slayton back, but you got James White, who decided not to run again and then eventually decided to run for ag commissioner and lost there. So we lost James as a phenomenal ally. So, we've got allies. We've got people that are in the House, and hopefully we have developed some brand new relationships in the Senate, but we're going to need to do a lot more. And there's nothing more convincing than while we're building that relationship than you as a constituent are communicating your desires to them. But we won't be releasing any lists until we get a little bit closer. And the reason is purely strategic, right? We're still in a situation where you've got an entrenched political establishment that would love nothing more than to punish anyone who supports us, and so it is an act of courage and boldness for these guys to step up. And so you don't, we don't have any intention of releasing any kind of lists too early, so early that it would potentially give the opposition room and time to move. So, but great question. Thank you for that. Okay. This is from Marty. Marty says a lot of propaganda being thrown around at the Texas State Board of Education lately. Absolutely. We sent out an action alert last week. We talked about it on Coffee Talk to discuss what was going on with the recommendations that were being presented to the State Board of Education. Any of you who don't know what I'm talking about, go to the website, look under news, you'll see the action alert, and that'll give you a heads up. But the recommendations, the draft recommendations, as they have now sort of come out, are far worse than I think many of us even really imagined. So we're working on something right now for the website. Now that we have full documentation of what those draft recommendations are, and we'll be consulting with our allies on the State Board of Education to figure out how we're going to absolutely defeat and shoot down some of this nonsense, some of these attack, what I would consider just pure, unapologetic attacks on Texas. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, it's that what's happening on the SBOE right now is pretty troubling. Now, I will say this before anyone hits the panic button: we've got time to deal with these things. And it's always good, as I said last week, to be able to have the relationships necessary to understand what's coming down the pike and be able to formulate strategy and plans and have plenty of time to implement. It's definitely better than being super reactive, having to deal with it at the last minute. So the other thing too is oftentimes these working groups will propose these recommendations that are just so outlandish that there's no way in the world that any member of the SBOE would ever do it, because they want to get reelected, right? So we'll keep monitoring the situation, and we'll continue to keep y'all informed. Oh, and notice, by the way, I'm not having to squint up here because I added a monitor here that looks like this one, where I can actually read everything, so I don't have to squint and get really close to look at your questions. Okay. let's find a good one here. Okay, this is a good one, and it's from a screen name that I think is very apt for the question. Would the TNM support a resolution that when Texas wins independence, that would prevent any elected official that voted to remain in the Union from ever holding an elected position in the Republic of Texas? Well, there's no way that you could know that, right? There's absolutely, it's a secret ballot. Your name doesn't go on the ballot when you put it in the box, so there's no way to figure that. And anything you did, you would have to infer from their public statements. And honestly, I think here's what it boils down to with TEXIT, when all of us together make TEXIT the number one issue, we know that there's already enough support to get it through the polls to win if it goes on a ballot. But these elected officials, they're not permanent positions, right? Just because we have TEXIT doesn't mean we stop having elections. But any politician who, as this becomes that major issue and goes on the ballot, speaks out publicly or works against it, will also pay a price at the ballot box. That's just the facts. That's what happens. When you had politicians that stood against Brexit, even though Brexit got by with by a whisker thin margin, you had a lot of those Remainer politicians pay a wicked, wicked price. And you see this time and time again, right? I mean, they wind up not just being on the losing side of a withdrawal vote, they wind up being on the losing side of political life because people look at them and go, they're not viable, right? If they're not representing me and my wishes on self-governance, then how can they represent me in these other areas? So sometimes, as I like to say often, sometimes the trash takes itself out. Excuse me. Um, all right. Sorry for the pause, guys. I'm looking through here trying to find what we got. Okay, let's find. Tell you what. Let's go over here to the email box. Right. Let's find one of the ones here. Okay. You know what? I literally had one in the queue. There it is. Okay. This one came in. No name. Can't read the email address. And it has like a bunch of questions, right? I'm not going to go through all of them, but there is one here that I think we can talk about. I'd love to answer all of them, but it's a time thing, right? The question is: do you believe Texas would spur other states to become independent? Do you have any plans to support them if they start their own movements? Then it says, I know Texas has special circumstances that make it easier to leave, but one doesn't ask their captor if they can leave their prison. They just do it. Okay. So this question presents an education opportunity, right? So let me take the last part of it first. Okay. We've been very clear. Self-determination, self-government is not a mother may I situation, right? Given the situation that the states of the United States are in, where we all enjoy that right, right? Go see the argument about Article 1, Section 10, 10th Amendment, right? That power reserved to the states, okay? The fact of the matter is that any state has that ability, and it doesn't take an act of Congress. It's one of the biggest lies promulgated by the opposition, and a lot of it is rooted in that ridiculous reading of the Supreme Court decision in Texas v. White, where Salmon P. Chase makes the assertion that it's an indestructible union, aka states can't leave, but then proceeds to give two mechanisms where he believes that it's possible by revolution or consent of the states, right? So, if you want to take down a Texas v. White, why Texas v. White doesn't apply, you can read about it in the TEXIT book. It's on the website at texitnow.org. I talk about it tons. Go through the archives, take a listen to some previous coffee talks, or ask me the question at a Q&A when I'm out speaking somewhere. I love nothing more than destroying Texas v. White. But aside from that, okay, the fact of the matter is that we have never claimed that Texas had some special right, right? That is some ridiculous kind of people halfway know what they're talking about, like the people that say Texas can't leave, but it can divide into 5 states. Well, that's sort of true, right? But only sort of. It's only, that first part is false, but the division into 5 different states is sort of true, and it depends on your reading of how Texas was actually brought into the Union. Okay, a topic for a whole other time. So, we've said it. All states have the rights. Matter of fact, when I released the TEXIT book and was doing a lot of media and a lot of interviews, the vast majority of those were outside of outlets outside of Texas, and they were trying to, trying to understand what this book had to say to people in their states, and the answer was simple. A lot of the facts presented in the Texas book are not Texas exclusive, right? The right of self determination is not exclusive to Texas. The right of the people to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient, while articulated in our Texas Bill of Rights, is not a right that is unique, right? If it's an inalienable right, then we all have it, right? And the fact that so much of the argumentation that we utilize to justify why Texas is the best path for Texas applies to other states as well. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Not all states overpay, 103 to 160 billion dollars annually into the union like Texas does, but yet all 50 states suffocate under the weight of 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations, and have to deal with 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. All 50 states have to deal with the fact that if their voters, if the people in their state make a decision on an issue, that ultimately some unelected, unaccountable federal judge can override that at the stroke of a pen, or dictatorial orders in the form of executive orders from a federal president can have virtually the same effect. So those things apply equally. So do we believe Texas would spur other states to become independent? I think so. I would hope so. I would hope that other states would begin to examine the situation as it is, and at a minimum have the conversation, and at the tops of it at least put it to a vote, right? I'm not here to decide whether any particular state should leave, and I think that frankly should be left up to them to decide. Now, can we resource that conversation? Absolutely, right? Can we help people that are forming organizations or movements that are trying to do the same thing in their state that we're doing in Texas? Absolutely. And we do it. We maintain very, very open lines of communication. We get emails almost every week from people in other states saying, "Look, I can't move to Texas to help out, but I would like to do in my state what you're doing in Texas." Great. We'll definitely help you. We'll set you on the path. We can't do it for you. We can't vote in your referendum, but we can cheer you on, whatever the result is, right? If you guys vote in, you guys vote out, we can cheer you on and say, hooray for the right of self-government. You made your choice. You had the debate. You made the decision, and go from there. So yeah, absolutely. So those are good questions. Do we plan to support them in as much as we can without it being seen as interference, right? Um, they those people need to be the ones that make their decision. Okay. So that was a good one. Thanks for that one. Whatever your name is, because you didn't include it, and in whatever city you happen to be in. Okay, here we go. Here is one from our one of our local coordinators in San Antonio, Stacy Pauley. Stacy wants to know, says Daniel often tells the story about the first meeting where he took over when the organizer didn't show up because he was threatened with his job. Do you ever know what happened to that man? Is he a TNM member or supporter now? Okay, so small backstory for those of you who don't know what she's talking about. I talk about on occasion, and I don't do it often because I don't spend a lot of time in the Wayback Machine, but I do talk about it some. And what literally it's about just a couple of weeks after my proverbial line in the sand moment. All right, so that was August 24th, 1996. A gentleman had scheduled an event for people that believed in independence there at a restaurant called the Hot Biscuit in Longview. It's no longer there. I think there's like a a Walgreens or a CVS there now, right? And I went, and the place, they had a meeting room. The place was absolutely jam packed. Well, the guy had been on TV. The media covered it, right? Because I mean, it was going to be a big to do. I mean, everybody's talking about Texas independence, right? So, he gives an interview because he's trying to organize this meeting. I mean, he was about as much of a baby in this as I was, and he was on TV. And so the day of the meeting comes along, and the guy gets pulled into his employer's office. And there's no shame in this because I don't know that they're much of a going concern, but Laterno Industries, right? Laterno there in Longview. Some of you know that name. I think they've been subsequently sold to somebody else and combined with this, but it was Laterno Industries. And I think I want to say he was a draftsman. But he gets called in the office and they say, hey, look, we can't have you on TV. It could reflect negatively on the company. Like literally no one worked. No one knew that he worked for Laterno, right? But they call him in and tell him, say, look, if you're going to do this, we're going to fire you, right? So he buckled, right? And I understand, it's difficult to make a choice between your livelihood or whatever, but at a minimum, he could have at least come to the hot biscuit and said, look, I can't lead this meeting. Let me see what I can do. He just flat no showed. Okay. So you've got this room, probably about 100 people, 150 people. I mean, it was packed to the rafters in that place, in that meeting room. They had a good sized meeting room. And literally no one knew what to do. The guy was a no show. And so I was standing out in the hallway. That's how overflowed the thing was. There was a little hallway that went into that meeting room, and I'm standing out there and some guy in a cowboy hat walks out and says, hey, anybody here know how to hold a meeting? Now, you gotta, do the math on this. This was a couple of weeks after I did it. So that was, probably very beginning of September, very tail end of August, I guess it'd be the very beginning of September, first, second week of September. So I wasn't even 23 years old yet. I was 22. And literally the only meetings I had ever run were school connected or extracurricular connected, right? And so I just said, I raised my hand. I said, I do. I've done it before. Don't know what this is. Okay, let's go do this. And so we piled into that thing and I just figured it out. Nobody handed a manual. I just did it, right? So that's the backstory. That's how it went down for those of you who don't know. And so Stacy's question is, whatever happened to that man? Right? Is he a TNM member or supporter now? And the answer is, I have no idea. Because he quit. He quit. You think about that. I tell people a lot of times, and Kara says this all the time. She says people have a tendency to stop short of greatness. I'd take and I agree with that, but also have a very pragmatic approach about it. Is one of the things that has been problematic about getting TEXIT across the finish line are people that at the first sign of pressure knuckle under, right? They get a little bit of pushback, they get a little pressure, and they quit. And if you start, taking all those people that quit over the years because they got a little pushback or they didn't understand or, oh man, this is uncomfortable, this thing would have already been done already. So I have a tendency, to not remember the quitter, Stacy. I would love to answer your question, but I can't even remember the guy's name. I just can't even. So even if he were a TNM member or supporter, I would not know. I wish I could help you with that. I really don't know, but I will say this: a lot of people that have kind of quit or washed out over the years, they come back, and whatever. Look, everybody's got their own personal circumstances, man. I don't fault anybody for that. If you need to, take a break or do whatever, but I also know, that stat that I heard time and time again related to the Texian Army and the Texas Revolution, that the desertion rate from the start of the revolution to the Battle of San Jacinto was 60%, right? Because people would suddenly think it was over, they'd deprioritize, they'd have something better to do. And, I'm thinking, maybe if the desertion rate had to been 60%, maybe the Alamo would not have fallen. Maybe there wouldn't have been a Goliad massacre. Maybe they would have had enough men and fighters at the time to send the Mexican army back south. So, but we can what if it to death, right? It's about what we're doing right now and what we do moving ahead. But, just overall, the thing about quitters, man, I could go on about that over and over. But I don't, because I want to talk about winners, people that are mentally tough, right? All right, so let's take some of these. Okay, here's one. Thank you for the super chat, fried chicken. You know the way to my heart, right? That's it. That's literally one of my favorite things in the world to eat. Thank you for the super chat. Question is, do you believe Texit will happen in your lifetime? Yeah, absolutely. I believe Texit is happening right now. That's and it may be semantics, right? But understand understand the semantics, because I think I'm of the school of thought that says words matter, right? When you choose a word or string of words, it really matters. Okay. And so I want everyone to understand something about the word Texit. Okay. Texit happens. People take the word Texit and they apply the meaning to the vote or to the final act of being completely independent, or anything in between. And that interchangeability becomes a problem. Okay. So Texit really and truly is not a single act. Okay. It's not the referendum. It's a Texit referendum, a Texit vote, but a Texit vote is not Texit. Texit is a process. Okay. So I'll dig deep back in the speech archives for this one, right? I can remember teaching this in Tyler probably 10 years ago. It's like independence, right? Independence is a state of being. Okay. Independence is a set of criteria that says that we are, we have political, cultural, and economic self determination. Okay, that's independence. It's the full thing. Okay, and so the independence aspect of it is the ultimate goal of Texit, the process of withdrawing Texas from the Union and reasserting its status as a self governing independent nation. Okay. So it's important for us to understand when we talk about Texit, and especially in the T&M when we talk about Texit, the vote is not Texit. Okay. Texit is the process that gets us independent. And that actually starts before the vote, right? Because the vote is an expression of political will. Okay. But to make Texit a reality, it's not just about the vote, it is creating that, not the mechanism of the vote, it's about creating the political will and the circumstances ahead of a Texit vote, so that first you get the Texit vote, and second, you win the Texit vote, which then continues the process and the path toward full, complete, and total independence. Okay. And I know for some people that may sound a little academic, right? It's like splitting hairs, but it's really not. Okay, it's very important that we have the right sort of mental framework and perspective, because if you think Texit is the vote, and 2 years pass and we don't get the vote, or 2 more years pass and we don't get the vote, well, then all of a sudden you're like, well, Texas is a failure. No, that's not the case at all. Texas is the process that started 2005 in November, when the Texas Nationalist movement was formed, right? That's when the process started. When we started consciously moving the needle on the issue to take it from polling in single digits to polling at 60 to 66% right now, where it is. Okay. That's part of the Texit process. That is Texit. So my comeback to people who say that Texit will never happen, or do you think it will happen in your lifetime, is always, it's literally happening right now. You are in the midst of it, right? It's not the single act of the vote, it's happening right now. And the duration of those spans between each of the individual milestones is completely dependent upon the people, right? If you create enough mass of people, if we reach the number of people that we need to reach, and we message them correctly, and we help them understand what I'm explaining to you now, then just like in physics, not to get all sciencey on everyone, but the more mass you have, the more gravity you have, and you shorten the timeline, right? That's why the tipping point, and I could probably do a whole one of these talking about the application of tipping point theory to what we do, but that's why the tipping point has always been so important to us. I talk about tipping point in the book. The tipping point theory is actually part of leadership training, right? Uh, it's why the numbers matter, why organization matters, why creating community matters. All of these things work together as part of the TEXIT process to help us not only get the vote, but to win the vote and then win the independence on the other side of the vote. Man, that was long. But I hope it made sense. If so, sound off in the chat. Otherwise, if I put you to sleep, then I am quite sorry. But thank you for your super chat. But you kicked the dog, so you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. So let's get down here. All right, let's get to another one of these. Okay, I don't have a name on this, but this is an interesting kind of a history question. Texas was an independent nation for 9 years. Who was behind the movement to make it a state of the United States? What was the grounds and conditions? Okay, et cetera. There's a lot more there, but I get the gist of the question, right? So, who was pushing it? I will tell you, interestingly enough. See, this is what committed to the cause looks like. When I got involved in leadership in the late '90s, early 2000s in this movement, pre TNM, I knew that I needed to be a better public speaker. Okay, now I'd already done public speaking, but I knew I needed to be a better one. And so I literally went to a college and enrolled in speaking classes, right? In speech classes. Now, good news was I was already a speaker. I'd already done plenty of that. But I enrolled in the classes, and one of the classes that I took was a business communications class, and there was a presentation that I was meant to give, and I literally gave it over that topic, right? The Texas annexation question, and it was very interesting in doing the research, finding out who was on each side of the issue, Texas in or Texas out, and looking at that interplay between basically what happened after Texas became an independent nation and the United States rebuffed every effort to bring Texas in. What happened in that intermediate time? And I will tell you this, and this is not exhaustive. I mean, this is one of those topics that, again, is a massive topic that you could discuss. Two interesting things that I found out during the course of that research. One was how opposed then Congressman Abraham Lincoln was to the admission of Texas into the Union. And it was for a variety of reasons, but primary among them was his belief that it was really just a precursor to war with Mexico. Okay, check. Okay, but that was reading about his particular opposition and the things he said during that debate, and how it was almost diametrically opposite of his positions that he took in the 1860s. Thought that was I was fascinated by that. But the other thing was how much the pro annexation side utilized Great Britain as a scare tactic, right? One of the debates, one of the arguments, speeches that I read dealt specifically with that there was essentially scaremongering that if Texas wasn't annexed, that that Texas would foster its relationship, that Great Britain would foster its relationship, because you got to remember it's an independent republic. We had the French legation here. We had diplomatic relations with countries around the world. Okay, and so the fear was that was spread and promulgated was that Great Britain was using its trade and friendly relations with the Republic of Texas to gain a foothold in as a precursor to an attempt to retake the United States. And literally that fear mongering worked. I wasn't surprised at the fear mongering itself, because notice they use the same play. It's always Project Fear, right? But I was honestly, what surprised me about that was just how effective it was. So anyway, again, a topic for another much lengthier conversation that I cannot get into tonight. How do y'all like the fact that I'm just doing your questions tonight and not rattling off all the different stuff? Okay, interesting suggestion here. And BR Holmes, thank you for the super chat. Says local governments should pass formal TEXIT resolutions. I do not disagree with you there. And there may or may not be something in the works to that end. But I will, I'm trying not to spoil anything because no official decisions have been made. But if you think right now you have counties, county commissioners courts, and county judges that are working to essentially mirror or copy, echo what they did in Kinney County and some of those other counties that are having the problem that are being impacted by the crisis on the southern border. They're passing resolutions declaring an invasion, and so you think along those lines, and there is some power to having that sort of uprising and I don't use uprising in that term, but this expression of will to, at a minimum, have the vote in the local community. So stay tuned for that. But thank you for the super chat, BR. That was a good one. Okay. Wow, man, you guys are slinging a lot of good ones tonight. All right, let's go back over here to the email. Okay, here we go. This is Anthony, and Anthony also sent this via email. As a strong supporter of the TEXIT movement, I strongly advise not to use as a main talking point the assumption that the U.S. would, could, or should continue to pay federal benefits post TEXIT. You can't guarantee it one way or the other, right? And again, we've been very clear about this. And if any of our people are not being clear about it, let me just clarify it tonight, right? We talk about what existing federal policy is when it comes to federal pension benefits, right? Because you say federal benefits, we never claim that all federal benefits, because we're no longer part of the federal government, right? But there are some federal pension benefits, right? All federal pension benefits that if you have earned them, you receive them regardless of where you live, with the exception of a handful of countries that are on the prohibited list, right? Like Iran and Syria and Cuba and Belarus, right? But that's it. And North Korea, right? That's kind of where that list is, and a lot of that is because those countries have engaged in financing or funding terrorism, or international criminal acts or whatever. And that's I don't anticipate that that's what Texas is going to do, right? So you have to ask yourself, what would be the pretext for the United States to change its existing federal policy to add Texas to the same list as Cuba and North Korea? And I'm not saying, and never have said, that I am so pie in the sky to think that they are not so vindictive that they would do it. But again, how much of a hard sell would that be, right? Because at that moment, what you're talking about is economic sanctions, right? You are literally sanctioning Texas. And what we have said is that any move economically that the United States takes to punish a state, particularly Texas, whose people go to the polls in a lawfully constituted vote and vote to reassert their status as an independent nation, and then work through the constitutional, the statutory, the international covenants, treaties, and agreements, and the negotiated issues. How well does that play in Peoria when winter comes around and they've initiated economic sanctions? I mean, how much oil can they possibly buy from the Saudis all the time? And how much is that going to get jacked up when it gets all refined here? Not all of it, but a whole lot of it does. Literally a couple miles from my house, right? So, the thing to bear in mind is that when we have talked about this from a messaging standpoint, what we do is we say, this is existing federal policy. This is the way that it works now. Okay. So, on the other side of that, if the United States federal government decides to do something different, Here's what the options are, and here's what the impacts are. It will impact the federal government far more than us because we are a donor state to the tune of 130 to 160 billion dollars annually. We know that pumping that money back in the economy will absolutely drive us from the ninth largest economy in the world back up to the eighth, to the seventh or eighth, not including the rollback of federal regulatory accumulation. So we have this booming economy. We have the ability to execute trade agreements around the world. So we talk about a surplus. Well, the amount of money that the federal government pays in federal pension benefits to people who live in Texas is a drop in the bucket. But from a messaging standpoint, I would suggest that people that are talking about this issue and concerned about this issue ask themselves this question. Why would it be that if we do everything that we're doing, we're above board, we're following the law, we go to vote, just because we vote wrong, that we want to govern ourselves, right? Wrong in the eyes of the federal government. If just because we choose to govern ourselves, that they won't pay federal pension benefits that you have paid into, that you have earned as a direct benefit, a direct relationship between the individual and the federal government, if you live in Texas, but are perfectly willing to pay it if you move right across the border into Juarez. Who's the bad guy there, right? But again, we already have a revenue surplus as it stands, with absolutely no increase in tax burden. If they decided to do that, it's a drop in the bucket, right? If we have to assume those payments, absolutely, Texas has the ability to do that. But you want to talk about a least likely scenario. That's a very unlikely scenario to happen. That all gets hashed out in those negotiated issues, and frankly, they would have to change their own policies to even make that conversation necessary. So, all right, man, my cough drop's running out. All right, let's get into another one, man. Okay, let's head over here to the email. Okay, John says, if the Republic of Texas does not have an electoral college, won't people running for president just campaign in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio? Well, let me ask you a question. Do people that are running for governor, lieutenant governor, or land commissioner or attorney general, do they just campaign in those cities? They don't. And Texas doesn't have an electoral college. That being said, the discussion and the concern about the imbalance between rural and urban here in Texas is not a new conversation, right? That's a conversation that's being had, and I can say that since we've been working the legislature since 2000, we've been working the legislature since 2009. It has obviously the urban rural concern goes back before that, but ways to address that uh, via policy and statute and constitutional changes have been a pretty constant fixture each session, and have gotten, in my opinion, louder. That started with the proposal of a constitutional amendment several sessions back. I don't know that it ever made it to the floor for debate, but the constitutional amendment would have effectively said that constitutional amendments are not ratified by popular vote, but ratified by a majority or supermajority of the counties in Texas. Okay, very very similar situation. We already have 31 Senate districts. It's a fixed number. We have 150 state reps, 31 state senators, and so many things are covered by Senate district, and that's one possibility for doing that. But those, John, all of those conversations, the conversation really about how do we fix this rural urban divide in Texas so that the areas that are not those main most populous cities actually get their voices heard. From a practical standpoint, I think every politician knows, everyone running for office. Notice I said running from office. Personal experience. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I think anyone who in Texas runs for statewide office understands the necessity to go work all the areas, both rural and urban. But I'm with you. on this particular issue, in that I firmly believe that we need to try to do everything we can to address that situation. Now, I'm not calling for an electoral college. I got an email in the other day, um, saying is Texas going to divide into states? It's like, it's like that commercial with that old woman on Geico, and she's got all of her pictures taped to her wall, and she's talking about her wall. Look at the pictures I'm posting on my wall, and the lady says something she doesn't like. She says, "I unfriend you," and the lady's there, and she's like, "That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works." I get questions like that, and I kind of feel that, does Texas need to divide into states internally? No, we already have things. We already have administrative subdivisions in Texas. They are called counties, right? They exist. They are literally defined as administrative subdivisions of the state. That's what they are. Okay. Additionally, if you wanted something that had a little more equal population, you have 31 Senate districts. I think during a redistricting year, I think the population variance that they shoot for is somewhere around 3% between Senate districts, right? They said an overall population, they divide that number by 31, and they redistrict it and try to maintain below a 3% variation, either up or down, on the population of those Senate districts. So that happens every 10 years. So there's no need to come up with a flea flicker play when you can just run the ball up the middle, right, or throw a pass. We've already got it, so let's just use it. But yeah, I'm with you, John. I see absolutely no reason why that conversation shouldn't continue, and I think at some point, the people in the rural counties, pretty much everywhere that's not Dallas, Houston, or San Antonio, are going to be screaming for that as the population continues to grow. Now, good news is a lot of those places, a lot of places in Texas that are not Dallas and Houston and San Antonio, are growing. Right, that's where a lot of the population's settling. These suburban areas, and I think it's going to make for an interesting political dynamic in the years to come. Okay, let's roll down here. Okay, here's Daryl. Daryl says, "I'm from Jersey." Okay, now is that New Jersey or is that like Jersey, like in the UK? Right? I don't know, but we're gonna assume that it's New Jersey. I know nothing about Texas Now. It just popped up on my feed. Tell me, what is Texas Now? So what you're talking about probably is that, which the screen's cut off, but it says TEXIT Now. And if you want to find out more about what we are and what we're doing, head over to tnm.me. Or if you have additional Texit questions, and this goes for anybody, head over to texitnow.org and peruse the FAQs. There are plenty. But thanks for joining us tonight, Daryl. Okay, let's get down to here we go. Okay, Brandon wants to know, how can we explain that Texit is not secession? Man, that's an interesting one. I covered it in the book, and secession is really, and it. I think it's actually sort of a point of debate or contention, right? Our contention is, if you look at the textbook definition of the word secession, in just a standard dictionary, it would probably, to a certain extent, apply, right? But one of the things to understand about the issue, and I'm going to take secession out of the equation, right, because that's the word that's in contention right now. If you look at the last 75 to 80 years, what you're going to do is you're going to see a world trying to come to grips with the fact that there has been this explosion of nation states, right? So the concept of nation state throughout world history is relatively new, right? You've had sovereign bodies, sovereign entities, you've had borders, but these words that we have a tendency to use so interchangeably, like nation and state and country, have only in the last few hundred years started really getting well defined, right? People are wanting to know, what are the implications of this word and what does the word really mean? And so, my shortcut has always been, nation is people, country is territory or land, right? And state is the sovereign, or as the body politic representing the nation, right? So a nation state. So that is the governance of the nation. Okay? Whole other topic. I could go on and on about that one. But the issue that I think is happening is that the word secession has this sort of common dictionary definition that people look at it, and really it was sort of an ill-defined process. Any process of breaking away was referred to as a secession. But what you've had in the last 75 to 80 years is also this major refinement of the meaning of that word, right? So the question is, and I'll put it to you this way, and this is the quandary for these people: was Kosovo, the creation of Kosovo, a secession from Serbia? Okay, was the UK leaving the European Union, was that a secession? If Scotland votes to withdraw from the United Kingdom, is that a secession? Right? And so, because there are all these various scenarios and nuances, the way that we look at it in the TNM, and I talk about it in the book, is that the use of the word secession has been used sort of as a blunt instrument to describe a whole lot of means and mechanisms for people to assert their status as an independent nation state, a nation among nations, right? And unfortunately, what has happened is, when you have a catch-all word like that, it does not necessarily apply in every instance, right? So in the book, I talk about the word secession and whether or not it is really the appropriate term to describe what we're doing, right? So much like no one referred to the United Kingdom withdrawing from the European Union as a secession, I don't believe that Texas or any state in the Union withdrawing from the Union is a secession. And the defining criteria for me is quite simple. And it's that Texas never lost its sovereign independent character. Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution. Texas is a free and independent state, right? So you have these individual, sovereign, self-governing bodies that come together to form a compact, right? And say, okay, look, in common, we're going to do this list of things, and anything that is not in that list, we have the power to do. We continue to have the power. So it is that sort of shuffle off of a little bit. It's kind of like if you joined a homeowners association sometimes, right? And let's be honest, sometimes homeowners associations can be far more obnoxious than the federal government. Prove me wrong, okay? But it's like that, right? So just like you have, say, the European Union, right? It is a political body. It's somewhat a moderate political union with very weak powers. It's effectively a trade union. That's where a free trade union. That's where it grew out of. And for many of the countries in it, it is a currency union, right, under the euro. But that applies to any. So let's just take one aspect, right? Let's take NATO. If the United States were to pull out of NATO, would anyone say that the United States seceded from NATO? Well, absolutely not, because the nature of the relationship never meant that the United States surrendered sovereignty to a mutual defense organization, right? They agreed to be a part of it under certain conditions, and if those conditions were not met, then any of the members of NATO have the ability to withdraw from it, okay? So that's just a mutual defense. But so there's nothing out there that says that, well, if you expand that relationship to include, a few other things, that it forces each person joining to give up their individual identity, right? So a way to look at this is this. Texas is effectively withdrawing its membership in the United States of America as a political entity, right? As a federation, because that's what it is. It's a federative republic. It's a federation. So Texas would be withdrawing its membership and reasserting its status as an independent nation. It's why the ballot question that we propose is as it is. Okay, but if Harris County wanted to leave and go on its own, well, that would be a secession. Why is that? Well, because Houston, Harris County is an administrative subdivision of the state of Texas, not a sovereign political body in its own right. So it's really academic, but I'm happy that we were able to talk about that because it is one of the things that's tough for people to differentiate. So one of the reasons I wrote about it in the book. Okay. Hey, Donna, thank you for your super chat. She says, freedom from tyranny is more precious than any government check. That was not a typo. I know what that was. I'd rather go back to work at DQ than remain a slave to the Fed. Well, I'm with you there. And if you have to do that, let me know because I do have a favorite Blizzard flavor. Just saying. Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that and appreciate the super chat. Wow. Folks, I am out of time, right? And I didn't even get to the one that I wanted to get to. But you know what? How about I end it? How about I end it with this? Okay. Um, Tim sent this in via email, and he said he's been a member. He took training to collect signatures, but can't talk to people about TNM anymore. The left has done a good job vilifying the term nationalist. Okay, he says he understands it on and on, right? So Tim is suggesting that we change the name. And so, I'll go a little overtime on this one so you guys understand. The name of the organization was one that we wrestled with as part of that 2-year process before 2005 to determine what this was going to look like. And the one thing that we set about to do was make sure that the organization had a name that was reflective of who we are and what we believe. Right? We are an organization of Texas nationalists. And if people are afraid of that term, that's their problem, right? Not our problem. And I understand, that some people may have a challenge with it. But, when I read the question, it sort of reminded me of the scene from the movie Office Space.
At least your name isn't Michael Bolton.
There's nothing wrong with that name.
There was nothing wrong with it until I was about 12 years old and that no-talent ass clown became famous and started winning Grammys.
Well, why don't you just go by Mike instead of Michael?
No way. Why should I change? He's the one who sucks.
So, that's kind of where we're at. And the fact of the matter is, and after I wrap up and do my end, I'm going to play a video for y'all to see that explains why it is that we have the name and why we're not afraid of it. Look, if people suddenly became offended by the term Christian because the propagandists vilified it, I would not renounce my Christianity and call myself, a Jesusite or whatever to placate them. We live as who we are, and we operate from that standpoint. And I got to tell you, Texans are getting sick and tired of being painted and put into boxes and vilified by people who, just looking for an excuse to do nothing or to participate in the demise of their own freedom. So I am a proud Texas nationalist. I will never, ever apologize for being what I am, because a Texas nationalist is someone who believes in their nation, and that nation happens to be called Texas, and believes in national independence. And so with that, I will thank you all tonight so much, and stay tuned because after I wrap this up, I am going to play that video. But look, I wanted to remind you, if you are not already a member of the Texas Nationalist Movement, please join the movement. TNM.me/join. That is TNM.me/join. And then, of course, local groups are forming. Brand new local coordinators onboarded just over the last few days. Groups are spinning up everywhere. Find your local group at tnm.me/local groups. Do not forget to download the official mobile app of the Texas Nationalist Movement and connect with us. Be sure you're a registered user already, right? So you'll be able to log into the app, but you can download it on the Apple App Store, Google Play, or you can go over to tnm.me/app and get the links there. And then, of course, do not forget the Catalyst campaign is ongoing. We are, we're doing really well, and we would love to have you guys as part of it. Find out more, head over to tnm.me/catalyst. That's tnm.me/catalyst, or you can go click any of the donation links on the TNM website. All right. Again, stay tuned for that video, but I'm going to leave you with the words that I leave you with every single solitary time we're together. And those are the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.